Captain Lee Hyun woke up to the sound of children laughing in the corridors outside his quarters. The morning light from Haven Colony's sun was streaming through the small window of his room on the transport ship. New soul, he stretched his arms and smiled as he listened to the happy sounds of families starting their daily. Hyun had been captain of civilian ships for 12 years now, but he had never seen anything as beautiful as Haven Colony. The planet looked like a giant blue and green marble floating in space with white clouds swirling around its surface. The colony ships had been coming here for 15 years, bringing families who wanted to build new lives far from Earth. He walked to the bridge of his ship where his crew was already working. Lieutenant Park Min-soo was checking the navigation systems while engineer Kim So-young was monitoring the engines. Everything was running perfectly, just like it had been for the past 3 months of their journey from Earth. Through the main viewing window, Lee Hyun could see other ships in their convoy. There were 5 transport vessels carrying families and supplies to Haven Colony. The ships were not built for war or fighting. They were built to carry people who wanted to live in peace and grow food and raise children under alien stars. On the planet below, Captain Park Seung-ho was walking through the main settlement of Haven Colony, checking on the morning activities. The colony had grown from 5,000 people to over 500,000 in 15 years. It was no longer just a small outpost, but a real city with schools and hospitals and parks where children could play. Park Seung-ho had been one of the first settlers on Haven Colony. He remembered when there was nothing here but empty land and big dreams. Now there were tall buildings and farms that stretched to the horizon. The colonists had built something amazing here. They had turned a wild planet into a home. In the hospital, Dr. Song Miran was taking care of a little girl who had broken her arm while playing in the anti-gravity playground. The girl was crying, but Dr. Song was very gentle with her. She gave the girl some medicine to stop the pain and told her funny stories to make her laugh. The little girl asked Dr. Song if it hurt when she was little and broke her arm. Dr. Song smiled and said that everyone gets hurt sometimes, but the important thing is that there are always people who care enough to help make it better. That was what Haven Colony was all about: people helping each other and taking care of each other. Across the colony in the farming district, engineer Choi Jae-min was working with the big machines that helped grow food. The soil on Haven Colony was different from Earth soil, but the human settlers had learned how to make it work. They grew rice and vegetables and fruits that fed the whole colony. The farms were beautiful to see. The green plants grew in perfect rows under the alien sun, and the air smelled like fresh earth and growing things. Choi Jae-min loved his work because he knew that every plant he helped grow would feed a family. He was helping keep people alive and healthy. In the school district, teacher Young Hae-jin was reading a story to her class of 30 children. The children came from many different families, but they all lived together on Haven Colony like one big family. The story was about brave explorers who traveled to distant stars to find new homes for their people. One of the children asked teacher Yang if they were like the explorers in the story. Teacher Yang said yes, they were all explorers living on a world that no human had ever seen. Before their parents came here, they were writing the first chapter of human life on Haven Colony. The children were excited to hear this. They asked if they could write their own stories about living on an alien world. Teacher Yang said they could write anything they wanted because this was their home now, and they could dream any dreams they wanted to dream. Meanwhile, in the Colony Defense Center, Major Kang Tae-woo was looking at his computer screens. The screens showed him what was happening in the space around Haven Colony. Most of the time there was nothing to see except stars and empty space and the occasional transport ship bringing supplies from Earth. Major Kang had been a soldier before coming to Haven Colony, but his job here was very different. He was not fighting wars or protecting against enemies. He was just making sure that the colony was safe from accidents like meteor strikes or equipment failures. The defense center had some weapons, but they were small and only meant to destroy dangerous space rocks or broken satellites. The colony had never needed to fight anyone because Haven Colony was far from the places where different alien species had conflicts. Colonists knew that there were other intelligent species in the galaxy. The VAC were one of the most powerful alien civilizations, and they controlled many star systems, but the VAC had never bothered Haven Colony. The humans had chosen this planet because it was far away from important trade routes and military areas. Everything seemed peaceful and safe. The colonists went about their daily work growing food and teaching children and taking care of sick people and building new homes for the families that arrived on transport. Ships every few months, but far away in space, the VAC military leaders were having meetings about the human colonies. They had been watching human expansion for several years, and they were not happy about it. The VAC believed that this part of the galaxy belonged to the Admiral. Kim Tae-won was the leader of a large VAC military fleet. He had convinced his superiors that humans were becoming too bold and needed to be taught a lesson. He said that humans were weak creatures who would run away if they were frightened. The other VAC commanders agreed with Admiral Kim. They had studied human colonies and seen that most of them had very few weapons. The humans seemed to spend their time farming and building instead of preparing for war. This made the VAC think that humans would be easy to defeat. Admiral Kim proposed a plan to attack one of the human colonies and destroy it completely. This would send a message to all the other human settlements that they should leave this part of space. The VAC had done this to other species before, and it always worked. The VAC Military Council approved Admiral Kim's plan. They gave him permission to take his fleet and attack Haven Colony. The attack would happen soon, and it would be devastating. The VAC had no idea what they were about to unleash back on Haven Colony. The morning continued. Peacefully, children played in the parks while their parents worked. Doctors took care of patients, teachers taught students, farmers grew food. Everything was normal and happy. Captain Lee Hyon finished his morning coffee and prepared to dock his transport ship at Haven Colony's main space station. He was looking forward to seeing the colony again and meeting the new families who would be starting their lives here. None of the humans on Haven Colony knew that this would be their last peaceful morning. None of them knew that VAC warships were already moving through space toward their home. None of them knew that their quiet lives were about to change forever. The sun continued to shine on Haven Colony, and the children continued to laugh and play. The future looked bright and full of hope, but sometimes the brightest day comes just before the darkest night. The emergency alarm woke Captain Lee Hyon from his sleep. His ship was 3 days away from Haven Colony when the distress signals started coming through the radio. The first message was broken and full of static, but he could hear someone screaming for help. Lieutenant Park Min-soo ran to the bridge with tears in his eyes. He had been monitoring the communications when the signals from Haven Colony suddenly went silent. The last transmission was from a little girl asking if anyone could hear her. The transmission cut off in the middle of her sentence. Captain Lee Hyon ordered his ship to change course and head back toward Haven Colony as fast as possible, but he knew they were too far away to help. The radio was full of emergency signals from escape pods and damaged ships trying to get away from the planet. The recordings that came through the radio were terrible to hear. Families were crying and screaming. People were calling out the names of their children and parents. The sounds of explosions and weapons fire could be heard in the background of every transmission. Engineer Kim So-young was trying to contact other ships in their convoy, but most of them were not responding anymore. The few ships that did answer were badly damaged and carrying survivors who had escaped from the planet. Their captains were reporting that Haven Colony was completely destroyed. Captain Lee Hyun's ship finally reached the Haven Colony system. 3 days later, there was nothing left but burning wreckage floating in space. The beautiful blue and green planet was covered in black smoke and fire. The space stations around the planet were destroyed. The rescue ships found less than 10,000 survivors out of the 500,000 people who had lived on Haven Colony. Most of the survivors were badly hurt, and many of them were children who had lost their parents. The survivors told horrible stories about the attack. Nurse Choi Min-ah had been one of the survivors. She was found floating in an escape pod with 5 small children. She had saved them from the hospital when the VAC soldiers came through the building, shooting everyone they could find. Choi Min-ah told the rescue workers that the attack came without any warning. The VAC ships appeared in the sky like angry storm clouds and started firing at everything they could see. The colony's small defense systems were destroyed in minutes, she said. The VAC soldiers came down to the planet in small ships and hunted people through the streets like animals. They were not trying to capture anyone or take prisoners. They were only trying to kill as many humans as possible. The children that Choi Min-ah had saved were too scared to talk. They just held on to her and cried. The oldest child was only 7 years old, and she kept asking when her mommy and daddy were coming back. Choi Min did not know what to tell her Captain Park Seung-ho, the founder of Haven. Colony was found dead in the ruins of the main government building. He had been trying to organize the evacuation when the building was hit by VAC weapons. The rescue workers found him still holding a list of families who needed help escaping. The news of Haven Colony's destruction reached Earth 2 weeks later. The government leaders were meeting in their offices when the first reports came in. President Yoon Ji-hai was reading budget papers when her assistant brought her the emergency message. President Yoon dropped her papers and stared at the message for a long time. She could not believe what she was reading. 500,000 people dead, children murdered in their schools, families burned alive in their homes, an entire world wiped out for no reason. She called for an emergency meeting of the Human Colonial Council. Representatives from every human world dropped what they were doing and traveled to Luna Station as fast as they could. The Great Assembly Hall had never seen so many angry and frightened people. The survivors from Haven Colony were brought to Luna Station to tell their stories to the council. The assembly hall was completely silent as Nurse Choi Min-ah described what she had seen. The children she had saved sat beside her holding her hands. Councilwoman Oh Hai-jin from Mars Colony stood up when Choi Min-ah finished speaking. Her voice was shaking with anger as she asked why the VAC had done this terrible thing. The survivors said the VAC had not given any reasons. They had just started killing. General Nam Du-hein, the commander of Earth's defense forces, stood before the council with a grim expression on his face. He had been a soldier for 30 years, but he had never seen anything as brutal as what happened to Haven Colony. General Nam told the council that this was not a normal military attack. The VAC had not tried to capture the colony or demand surrender. They had simply murdered everyone they could find. This was not war, it was genocide. The council members were shocked and angry. Many of them had friends and family members who had lived on Haven Colony. Some of the representatives were crying as they listened to the reports. Others were so angry they could barely speak. Dr. Song Jae-wook, the head of the Human Research Collective, was called to speak to the council. He was an old man who had spent his life studying ways to defend human colonies from attack. He had always hoped his research would never be needed. Dr. Song told the council that he had been working on weapons projects that were too dangerous to ever use. The government had paid for his research as insurance against the worst possible situations. Now the worst had happened. He said his laboratories had designs for weapons that could destroy entire fleets of enemy ships. The weapons were so powerful that he had kept them locked away because he was afraid of what they could do. But now he was more afraid of what would happen if humans did not fight back. President Yoon asked Dr. Song how long it would take to build these weapons. Dr. Song said it would take months of work and require resources from every human colony, but it could be done if everyone worked together. The council voted to begin immediate war preparations. Every human colony would contribute ships and materials and people to the war effort. The mining colonies would dig up metals and rare elements. The industrial colonies would build weapons and ships. Councilwoman Oh Hai-jin made a speech that was broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. She said that the VAC had made a terrible mistake by attacking innocent families. They had thought humans would be afraid, but instead they had made humans angry. She said that humans had always chosen peace when possible, but they would choose war when their children were murdered. She promised that Haven Colony would be remembered and that its people would be avenged. The message went out to every human world within hours of the council meeting. Farmers stopped growing food and started making weapons. Factory workers stopped making civilian goods and started building warships. Young people lined up at recruitment centers to join the military. Older people volunteered to work in weapons factories. Scientists shared their most dangerous research with the military engineers. Parents kissed their children goodbye and went to war. The VAC had no idea what they had started. They thought destroying Haven Colony would make humans afraid. Instead, it had awakened something that had been sleeping. The dragon was stirring, and soon it would wake up completely. Admiral Kim Tae-won stood on the bridge of his flagship looking at the reports from his intelligence officers. The humans had gone completely silent after the destruction of Haven Colony. All their radio transmissions had stopped. All their trade ships had disappeared. All their diplomatic messages had ended. This pleased Admiral Kim very much. He had expected the humans to beg for mercy or try to negotiate. He had thought they might send messages offering to leave this part of space, but complete silence was even better. It meant the humans were too frightened to even speak. The other VAC commanders were celebrating the success of their attack on Haven Colony. They sent messages to Admiral Kim, congratulating him on teaching the humans a lesson. The VAC High Command was so pleased they gave Admiral Kim a medal for his service, but something strange was happening in human space that the VAC could not see. Every human colony was working day and night on secret projects. Ships were moving between worlds carrying mysterious cargo. People were disappearing from their normal jobs and going to work in hidden facilities on the industrial world of New Bizan. Commander Kang Soo-jin was overseeing the construction of something that had never been built before. The massive shipyard was working around the clock building a new type of vessel that was designed for only one purpose. The ship was 3 times larger than any human vessel that had ever been built before. Its hull was made from new materials that could absorb energy weapons. Its engines were more powerful than anything humans had ever created. Its weapons were based on technology that had been locked away for decades. Commander Kong had been an engineer before the war, but now she was learning to be a ship captain. The new vessel needed someone who understood both how to build ships and how to destroy them. She studied the weapon systems until she knew every detail by heart. The ship had no name because names were for things that had purposes beyond killing. This vessel existed only to make the VAC pay for what they had done to Haven Colony. The workers who built it called it Dragon 1 because it would breathe fire on the enemies of humanity in the research facilities on Europa. Dr. Song Jae-wook was unlocking secrets that he had hoped would never see the light of day. His laboratories were full of scientists working on weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The weapons were so advanced that even other humans were afraid of them. The new plasma cannons could melt through any known armor. The gravity bombs could tear apart planets. The quantum torpedoes could phase through shields and explode inside enemy ships. Dr. Song had designed these weapons during peaceful times as theoretical exercises. Now the theories were becoming reality. Factories across human space were building these terrible weapons as fast as they could. Workers who had once made farming equipment were now making instruments of war. Children were learning to build weapons instead of toys. On the military training world of New Sparta, Major Yang Yanesio was training soldiers who would never return home. These were not peacekeepers or colony guards. These were warriors whose only job was to kill VAC soldiers and destroy VAC ships and make the VAC regret their attack on innocent families. The soldiers called themselves the Haven Guard, and they wore black uniforms with no insignia. They trained 18 hours a day learning how to use the new weapons and how to fight in space and how to show no mercy to enemies who had shown no mercy to human children. Major Yang had lost her sister and her 3 nephews in the Haven Colony attack. She had been a training instructor before the war, teaching soldiers how to keep peace. Now she was teaching them how to wage war with efficiency that would terrify their enemies. The Haven Guard soldiers were different from any human military unit that had ever existed before. They did not train to capture territory or negotiate surrender. They trained to eliminate every VAC soldier they encountered. Their motto was simple: for the children who will never grow up. Meanwhile, in the asteroid mining belt, thousands of workers were extracting rare metals and elements needed for the war effort. The mining ships worked without rest, pulling precious materials from rocks that floated in the darkness between worlds. Mining supervisor Lee Dong-woo had converted his entire operation to support the war effort. His workers were no longer mining materials for construction or manufacturing. They were mining materials for weapons that would rain death on the VAC homeworld. Miners worked with desperate energy because they knew that every piece of metal they extracted could become part of a weapon that would avenge Haven Colony. They worked in shifts that never ended, sleeping only when exhaustion forced them to rest. In the agricultural colonies, farmers were growing food to feed the largest military force in human history, but they were doing much more than that. Biologist Park Hae-young was developing new types of biological weapons based on diseases that would only affect VAC physiology. The biological weapons were designed to be delivered by special missiles that would spread the diseases through VAC cities. The diseases would not kill quickly, but would cause terrible suffering. The humans wanted the VAC to understand what the children of Haven Colony had felt in their final moments on Earth itself. President Yoon Ji-hai was coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. Every resource of every human world was being directed toward one goal: the complete destruction of the VAC military and the punishment of those who had ordered the attack on Haven Colony. The president had not slept more than 3 hours a night since the attack. She spent her days reviewing battle plans and her nights reading the names of the dead from Haven Colony. She had memorized the names of every child who had been killed. Government officials who had once worked on trade agreements were now working on invasion plans. Diplomats who had once negotiated peaceful treaties were now planning the conquest of VAC worlds. Everyone had a role to play in the coming war. The VAC intelligence services began to notice strange energy readings coming from human spaceships were moving in patterns that made no sense. Transmissions were being sent in codes that could not be broken. Construction was happening on a scale that seemed impossible, but Admiral Kim Tae-won dismissed these reports as signs of human panic. He believed the humans were just trying to organize some kind of evacuation. He told his intelligence officers that frightened species always acted in strange ways before they surrendered. The VAC had studied human technology and found it adequate. They had observed human military forces and found them small. They had watched human colonies and found them peaceful, but they had never bothered to study human history or human psychology. If they had studied human history, they would have learned that humans were the most successful predators their planet had ever produced. They would have discovered that human beings had conquered their entire world by being better at killing than any other species. If they had studied human psychology, they would have learned that humans became most dangerous when they were protecting their children. They would have found out that humans could work together with terrifying efficiency when they had a common enemy, but the VAC had not done this research. They had made their plans based on what they could see, not on what humans were capable of becoming. They had no idea that they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human soul. 6 months after Haven Colony burned, the first Dragon-class battleship entered VAC space. The VAC patrol ship Glorious Conquest was conducting its regular patrol along the border of VAC space when something appeared on their sensors. Captain Varek looked at the readings and assumed it was another human refugee ship trying to escape from the destroyed colonies. Captain Vorek had destroyed 3 human refugee ships in the past month. The VAC High Command had ordered all human vessels to be destroyed on sight to prevent any survivors from reaching other human colonies. He enjoyed this work because it was easy and the humans never fought back. When the unknown ship dropped out of hyperspace, Captain Varek realized this was not a refugee vessel. This ship was enormous and black as the space between stars. Its hull was covered with weapon systems that the VAC computers could not identify. The human ship did not send any surrender signals. It did not ask for mercy. It did not try to run away. It just appeared in front of the VAC patrol ship like death itself had come calling. The ship broadcast no identification and made no demands. Commander Kang Soo-jin stood on the bridge of Dragon 1 looking at the VAC ship on her viewing screen. She thought about the children of Haven Colony who had died screaming. She thought about the families who were burned alive in their homes. She thought about the 500,000 innocent people who had been murdered. The VAC ship was trying to contact Dragon 1, demanding that the human vessel surrender. Captain Varek was sending messages, threatening to destroy the human ship if it did not leave VAC space immediately, but Commander Kang was not interested in talking. She looked at her weapons officer, Lieutenant Cho Min-ho, and gave him the order that would begin the war fire. She said quietly, the new human plasma cannons lit up space with beams of energy that were brighter than stars. The VAC ship's shields were designed to stop conventional weapons, but these were not conventional weapons. The shields collapsed in seconds like paper in a fire. The hull of the Glorious Conquest began to melt under the intense heat of the human weapons. Captain Varek had just enough time to realize he had made a terrible mistake before his ship exploded into 1,000,000 pieces. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from several star systems away. Commander Kang watched the VAC ship die and felt no satisfaction. She felt no joy or relief or sense of victory. She felt only the cold determination to continue killing until every VAC who had participated in the massacre of Haven Colony was dead. Dragon 1 disappeared back into hyperspace before any other VAC ships could respond. The attack had lasted less than 3 minutes, but it sent a message that echoed across the galaxy. The humans were no longer running, they were hunting. Admiral Kim Tae-won received the report of his patrol ship's destruction with growing concern. This was not the behavior of a frightened species seeking mercy, this was the behavior of predators who had found their prey. The single human ship had appeared, killed, and vanished like a ghost. Within days more, VAC patrol ships began disappearing along the border regions. The attacks always followed the same pattern. A single human ship would appear, destroy its target, and vanish back into hyperspace. No warnings were given, no demands were made, no mercy was shown. The human ships were using new technology that the VAC had never seen before. Their weapons could destroy VAC vessels in seconds. Their engines could outrun anything in the VAC fleet. Their stealth systems made them nearly impossible to track. Captain On Byung-ho led the first ground assault on a VAC military base. The base was located on a small moon and was supposed to be secret. But human intelligence had found it. The base was where the VAC stored weapons and trained soldiers for attacks on civilian targets. Captain On and his haven guard soldiers approached the base in small ships that were invisible to VAC sensors. The soldiers wore new armor that made them look like demons from human nightmares. Their weapons were designed to cause maximum terror. The VAC guards at the base never saw the humans coming. The first sign of attack was when the base commander found his guards had simply vanished from their posts. The Haven Guard soldiers moved through the base like shadows, killing every VAC soldier they found. The VAC tried to surrender, but the humans were not accepting surrender. The Haven Guard had come to deliver a message, and that message required the complete destruction of everything the VAC had built on this moon. Captain On found the base commander's office and discovered files showing that this base had been used to plan the attack on Haven Colony. The commander had kept recordings of the massacre as entertainment. Captain On made sure the commander died very slowly. The human soldiers destroyed every building on the base and killed every VAC they found. Then they left a message for other VAC forces to find. The message was simple: this is what happens to those who murder human children. Similar attacks were happening throughout VAC space. Human ships were striking deep into enemy territory, destroying military installations and orbital platforms. The attacks were perfectly coordinated and devastatingly effective. The VAC military tried to respond, but they could not find the human ships to fight them. The humans would appear, strike their target, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. It was like fighting ghosts who could kill with supernatural efficiency. Major Young Yoon SEO led an attack on a VAC training facility where young VAC soldiers learned to fight. The facility was on a planet that the VAC considered completely safe, deep in their own territory, but nowhere was safe from human vengeance. The Haven Guard soldiers landed on the planet in the middle of the night and moved toward the training facility like death walking on two legs. They encountered VAC patrols, but the patrols simply disappeared without even having time to send warning signals. Major Yang had studied the layout of the facility for months. She knew where every VAC soldier slept, where every weapon was stored, where every commander had his office. Her soldiers moved through the facility with precision that was almost supernatural. The attack was over in 20 minutes. Every VAC soldier in the facility was dead. Every building was destroyed. Every piece of equipment was turned to scrap metal. The humans left no survivors and took no prisoners. The message was spreading throughout VAC space that something terrible had been awakened. The humans were no longer the peaceful farmers and colonists that the VAC had observed. They had become something that the VAC had never encountered before. They had become the apex predators of the galaxy, and they were hunting the species that had dared to kill their children. The dragon had awakened, and its fury was terrible to behold. Admiral Kim Tae-won sat in his command center reading report after report of destroyed bases and missing ships. His grand fleet was being picked apart piece by an enemy he could not see or predict. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kim felt something he had never experienced before. He felt fear. Not fear of death or defeat, but fear of an enemy that showed no mercy and accepted no surrender. The humans had become something that the VAC, with all their centuries of conquest, had never faced before. They had become the nightmare that would haunt VAC dreams until the end of time. The dragon was fully awake now, and it was hungry for VAC blood. 1 year after the destruction of Haven Colony, the HFY Command finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. The humans had done something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had mobilized their entire civilization. For total war, every human colony had become a military base, every human ship had become a weapon of war. Every human citizen had become a soldier in a conflict that would not end until justice was served. The scale of human mobilization was beyond anything the HFY had thought possible. General Nam Du-Hyan stood before the assembled human fleet in the Centauri System 5,000 ships of war filled the space around the military staging area. It was the largest fleet that had ever been assembled. In the history of the galaxy, the ships were not like the peaceful vessels that humans had built before the war. These were instruments of destruction designed for one purpose: to make the HFY species pay for the crime of murdering innocent families. Each ship carried weapons that could destroy entire worlds. Behind General Nam, a holographic display showed the final moments of Haven Colony. The images played on endless repeat, showing children running for their lives while HFY soldiers hunted them through burning streets. The images reminded every human soldier why they were fighting. General Nam spoke to his fleet commanders through the communication system. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the cold fury beneath his words. Today, we finish what the HFY started when they chose to murder our children, he said. The human fleet began its final jump toward the HFY home system. The ships moved through hyperspace like a swarm of angry hornets, carrying death to the species that had awakened their wrath. The journey would take 6 hours, but the HFY had no idea what was coming on. The HFY homeworld of Vakthara, 12 billion aliens went about their daily lives, unaware that their world was about to become a battlefield. The planet had never been attacked by an outside force. The HFY considered their home system to be completely safe. Admiral Kim Tae-won was in his office reviewing the latest reports of human attacks when his communication system activated. An aide was calling to tell him that long-range sensors had detected a massive fleet approaching the home system. Admiral Kim rushed to the fleet command center and looked at the sensor displays. What he saw made his blood freeze in his veins. Thousands of human ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The entire human military was here. The HFY defense fleet scrambled to respond, but they were outnumbered 5 to 1. The human ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible. Each vessel knew exactly where to go and what to do without any apparent communication between them. Admiral Kim ordered his ships to form defensive formations around the homeworld, but the human fleet ignored the HFY formations completely. They divided into smaller groups and began attacking military targets throughout the system. The battle began when the human ships opened fire with their new weapons. The space around Vakthara lit up with energy beams and explosions as the most advanced weapons in the galaxy were unleashed on the HFY fleet. The HFY ships fought bravely, but they were fighting against technology that was generations ahead of their own. The human plasma cannons melted through HFY armor like hot knives through butter. The gravity bombs tore HFY ships apart at the molecular level. Commander Kang Soo-jin led Dragon 1 and 50 other battleships in a direct assault on the HFY orbital defense platforms. The platforms had been designed to protect the homeworld from any possible attack, but they had not been designed to face human fury. The human ships moved through the HFY defenses like sharks through a school of fish. Each human vessel destroyed multiple HFY ships before moving on to the next target. The HFY formations collapsed under the relentless human assault on the surface of Vakthara. The alien population watched in terror as their mighty fleet was destroyed in orbit. The space around their world filled with the burning wreckage of HFY ships while the human fleet continued its methodical destruction. Major Yang Yun-seo led a ground assault on the HFY military command center where the orders for the Haven Colony massacre had been given. The Haven Guard soldiers landed on the planet in drop ships that looked like falling meteors. The HFY ground forces tried to resist, but they were facing soldiers who had trained for a year to do nothing but kill. HFY warriors, the Haven Guard, moved through the HFY military complex like a force of nature, destroying everything in their path. Major Yang found the command center where Admiral Kim Tae-won was coordinating the defense of his homeworld. She looked at the HFY officer who had ordered the death of 500,000 innocent humans and felt a cold satisfaction. of Justice Admiral Kim tried to surrender, but Major Young was not interested in surrender. She was interested in making sure that the VAC understood what they had done when they chose to murder human children. The battle for the VAC home system lasted 18 hours, but it was not really a battle. It was an execution. The human fleet systematically destroyed every VAC military installation, every orbital platform, every defensive system when the last VAC warship exploded in the darkness of space. The human fleet surrounded the VAC homeworld. The 12 billion aliens on the planet waited in terror for the humans to begin bombarding their cities. But the bombardment never came. Instead, President Yoon Ji-hai broadcast a message to the VAC homeworld. And to every other species in the galaxy, her words were calm, but they carried the weight of absolute finality. You attacked our colony because you thought we were weak. She said you murdered our families because you thought we would be afraid. You killed our children because you thought we would not fight back. You were wrong, the message continued. You have seen what happens when you mistake human kindness for human weakness. You have learned that peaceful humans are peaceful by choice, not by necessity. We chose to live in harmony with our neighbors, but you chose war, President. Yoon explained that the humans would not destroy the VAC homeworld because humans were not monsters, but the VAC military would be completely eliminated. Every VAC warship would be destroyed. Every VAC military base would be turned to rubble. The VAC species would be allowed to survive, but they would never again be able to threaten innocent civilians. The humans would establish monitoring stations throughout VAC space to ensure that the VAC never again built weapons of war. The message ended with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Let this be a lesson to any species that thinks about harming human families. We are peaceful when we can be, and terrible when we must. Baby Dragon had roared, and the galaxy had heard. The human fleet began its journey home, leaving behind a broken VAC military and a species that would never forget the price of murdering innocent children. Captain Lee Hyun stood on the bridge of a human warship and looked out at the stars. He thought about the peaceful morning 1 year ago, when he had been bringing families to Haven Colony. He thought about the children who would never grow up. The war was over, but the memory of Haven Colony would live forever in human hearts. The peaceful farmers and teachers and doctors who had died there had been avenged, but they could never be brought back. Humanity had learned a terrible lesson about the galaxy they lived in, but they had also taught the galaxy a lesson about the price of threatening human families. The dragon had awakened, and the universe would never be the same.